Hey everybody, thanks for joining me again. Today I have something a little bit different. I've been asked quite a few questions about my main speakers and thought I'd finally make a video on them. I was very hesitant at first because I simply didn't want to hear the "oh, you should have done this, you should have done that," or "that's a waste of money," and things like that. And I wouldn't mind if the comments are legitimately helpful, but you know the internet, more times than not, the comments are meant to be mean-spirited and not helpful at all. Particularly when they're the kind of comment that say "my friend did it this way," or "I heard about this," and not even coming from somebody who actually builds speakers. So let me say this up front. I am not a carpenter. I took 2 classes of woodshop back in high school, but I very much do enjoy the building process and I appreciate the art of woodworking. I do wish I was better at it, but I work with the skills that I have. I am also not a speaker designer, but I do know what I like and what I don't like, and I'm willing to put my money up to experiment. I do believe that parts do make a difference. And I understand that some people believe that they don't. And that's totally fine. Those people can save themselves a lot of money on crossover components. I personally have heard quite a big difference when I built my first set of speakers, the GR Research XLS Encores. I initially purchased basic crossover components and then upgraded to very high quality components. And to my ear, the detail and the scale of the sound was greatly improved. So on to my DIY build, my main speakers. These are based on a plan from Joseph Crowes DIY Audio, his two-way design Sabourin system, which consists of a horn covering the highs and a bass cabinet crossed over at 300 Hz that extends down to 31 Hz. I initially saw images online and I loved the design of the horn itself and I thought it might be an interesting build. So I purchased a plan from Joseph Crowes' website. But then I decided to add a super tweeter. I purchased a pair of LCY K100 super tweeters over at Matasound and reached out to Joseph and commissioned him to build the super tweeter horn. I asked him to make me a walnut horn that would cover 10 kHz and above. And you can see a video on this build over on his YouTube page. He also redesigned the now mid-range crossover into a bandpass instead of a high-pass filter. And that got us the three-way design we have now. The bass cabinet under 300 Hz, 300 to 10K on the mid, and 10K and above on the super tweeter. And after some communication with Joseph, he recommended that I place the super tweeter in between the horn and the bass cabinet. As I was waiting for the super tweeter to arrive, I started construction on the bass cabinet. At that time, it was towards the beginning of that virus situation, and there was a Baltic birch plywood shortage. I couldn't find any 24mm Baltic birch plywood in the LA area, so I decided to go with 24mm MDF. And I initially didn't want to go this route because I didn't want the extra weight associated with the MDF, but they turned out to be pretty manageable anyways. I cut and assembled the base cabinet and sealed the MDF with weatherproofer before applying paint. I added GR Research's no-res sound dampening material to the inside walls of the base cabinets minus the floor and the roof, as I had ran out of material at that point. The woofers are the 12-inch Dayton Audio DS315s, which are a pretty nice paper cone woofer that's pretty omnidirectional to about 500 Hz, and still even pretty good to around 750. Next I started on the bass cabinet's low-pass crossover, and I used 16-gauge air core inductors and polypropylene and copper foil capacitors. For hookup wire, I used DH Labs Odyssey 2 cable, and for the binding posts, I used the Viborg coppers. And finally, for the feet, I found a set on Amazon that I thought worked pretty well. They had a nice color and the price is right. Although I am playing with the idea of either changing those up for the Stack Audio Alva 70s or building a custom sandbox in the same shape as the bass cabinet. So we'll see where I go with that. As for the paint, I wanted a champagne color. So I found a nice warm tone and I added some automotive sequence to that. Later I found out that Sherwin-Williams already offers a glitter paint that would have saved me the trouble of mixing the glitter. But the results that I got were pretty much what I was looking for. You get this glimpse of sparkle and shine when the light hits the speakers at just the right angle. Next I started on the horn. And this is where my lack of carpentry skills almost killed the project. I was doing all my cuts with a compound miter saw and a circular saw. But in retrospect, I think that this project really does call for a table saw with a sled to get the angles of the cuts pretty accurate. Both of which I don't own, but I really should have rented. The pieces that I cut to make the pedals of the horn were just not lining up. And after 2 failed attempts at the horn, I was kind of getting discouraged. And then my planar magnetic transducers arrived from Parts Express. And those are the GRS PT6825s. And they're pretty much copies of the BG Neo 8. I believe its patents expired a few years back, and Parts Express was able to get some manufactured. So I got so excited with those drivers that I decided to plug them up. I got a few pieces of scrap wood, placed them on the side of the transducer, plugged the transducer in, and wow, I love the sound of those transducers as dipoles. And from there, I scrapped the whole horn idea and decided to go open baffle dipole. I got some scrap MDF and I cut it to different widths, and that's how I ended up with the 6-inch width that I have now in my final product. The larger widths did give you a little more front energy and the notes did go a little bit deeper, but the soundstage on the thinner baffles was more impressive to me, and definitely more in line with my listening preferences. Once I got that 6-inch width, I went ahead and made a cutout for the transducer on a piece of walnut. But now I had to tweak that mid-range crossover to accommodate for the loss of output from not having that horn, as well as the ability to go deeper. So instead of crossing at 300, I changed that crossover point a little bit higher to 500 Hz, which of course had me change the base cabinet's crossover as well. I kept the crossover exposed, and I CA glued all the components to the walnut baffle's base. Again, I used poly and copper foil capacitors, a dual-link graphite resistor in the notch filter, and copper foil inductors, the same Viborg binding posts, and dual-link 12-gauge tin copper wire for hookup. I'm still toying with the idea of encapsulating the crossover in a solid block of clear epoxy that'll keep me from having to dust them so frequently and also give them some protection. I do still want to keep those crossover components visible, I just like the look. As for the super tweeter horns, I just encapsulated them in a small wooden box just to give them protection. The crossover is just one capacitor, and I use a single MyFlex KPCU copper foil cap. All in all, this was a really fun project that took me about 2 months to complete, as I was just working on this project over weekends. I had a great time, and it taught me a few lessons. Now here in this graph is the in-room frequency response of the original 3-way crossover. Now keep in mind that that crossover was designed for use with the horn, and I did not use a horn. And on the bottom graph, my modified crossover. I didn't sum quite as well as I wish I could have. I do wish I could have fine-tuned just a little bit at the crossing point. If you see there at the 500 Hz, has a slight little dip. I'm about 2.5 dB shy. And if I was a little more advanced at crossover design, I'm sure it wouldn't have been a problem. But I decided to leave that alone. So instead of reworking the crossover, I go ahead and adjust my EQ in ROON and give myself that 2.5 dB boost at 500 Hz. And I'm cool with that. Or maybe in the future, I'll send it to a professional to have them fine-tune it. As for sound, the speakers do sound amazing. They're very revealing of detail, super fast transient response, and very holographic with a wide and deep soundstage. And they make listening for differences in DACs an easy chore. I do find that their sweet spot is 3 to 4 feet from the front wall. And I get crystal clear output of 90 dB averages at 8 feet, with peaks of 110 dB. When I get to 100 dB averages, distortion starts to creep into that mid-range driver, and the woofer gets close to its max excursion. The size of the base cabinet might not be the most convenient, and aesthetically, they might not be to everybody's liking, but that's the fun part about DIY. It doesn't matter what everybody else says, all that matters is how you like them. All in all, I think my project came out wonderful. I love the sound of these speakers, I'm very familiar with them, and they're a great tool for myself to listen to other devices on that set of speakers. Check out Joseph Crowes' site. He also has a video on his Sabourin speakers so you can learn a little bit more about them. That's all I have for you guys today, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.